So it was somewhat odd to be the one to address, since in fact I was listening. And I'm still listening. And yet I see that I represented a position of someone to whom you could really say anything, because I was presumably not there, would never be there, could not be reached, and would never be listening. It seemed to me that the address was a way of breaking off or breaking away, and that my name was something of a point of departure which needed to be spoken back to in order to be liberated from. And what remained unclear to me was whether my name was actually required for that particular breakage, whether it was functioning as the site of an historical transition. I suppose what was most painful for me was to see that this woman was speaking out against shame, and that she was speaking out ragefully against shame. She didn't want to be ashamed. She wanted to be able to speak out, and she had to use anger to overcome that. So if Butler was part of what she needed to throw off, let's say I'm throwing you off, I wondered whether my position was operating as a source of shame for her, okay, or as a barrier, or as a repression, or as a silencing. So there's, of course, a further question, which is difficult to pose, which is whether the exhilaration of this kind of fuck you, this breaking off, depends upon a certain kind of character or figure against whom one rails, and whether there's not a kind of gender pain associated with that very figure. Anyway, let's assume that rageful poems are ways of working with what we can generally call gendered pain, at least in this context. But I don't mean to pathologize this. There's a certain pain that parents and psychologists fear for their queer and transgender youth. Like, oh, don't go in that direction. You'll lead such a painful life. I don't want you to have pain, right? But actually, it's that very phrase, it's that very remark that is the installation of pain. In other words, if you live this way, you will be living a life of pain. Why can't you be normal? Right? So it's a way of kind of threatening pain. When actually, it may well be about pleasure, which is why most people are making certain kinds of gender and sexual innovations to begin with. And because living within certain normative situations is too painful. Okay. Anyway, let that go. I want to get back to this. Of course, one thing that I found interesting was she then wrote to me. I went up to her. I went up to her afterwards, and I showed my face. It was a Levinas-y moment. I thought, I wonder if she'll recognize me. And I stood, and I actually loved her poem. I thought it was a great poem. And so I went up to her, and I said, thank you for your, and I tapped her on the shoulder, and she turned, and she looked at me. Nothing. And I said, thank you for your brave and lucid poem. And she said, oh, thank you. And she was a happy girl. She said, thank you very much. And she just beamed. I said, I thought it was really powerful and really lucid. I said, by the way, I'm Judith Butler. Her face fell. And she said, she just looked shocked, and I, smiled warmly and left. And then the next day on my email comes a note from her, and it was an interesting note. And she said, look, you have to understand, it's not you personally, but your work has been really influential in queer theory, and it's really established the idea that we can just be whatever we want, or that we can do without fixity. But actually, a lot of us need fixity. We need to be in a very specific place, and we need to have names for that. And the binary gender system really works for us. And it seems like queer theory doesn't really understand the situation of trans people, and it's actually in some tension. And indeed, this kind of argument has also been made by intersex communities in relationship to queer theory. Like, okay, so I'm not queer theory. I mean, yes, I've had something to do with queer theory, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, fine. So I wrote back and I said that I was really sorry that queer theory had become something that was in any way inimical to trans politics, and that I actually was hoping to support trans politics in whatever way I could, and that it may well be, that for some people a release from fixity is what they need, and for others they actually need some fixity as a kind of real side of safety and recognition and pleasure. And, so we kind of agreed, that there were important dialogues to have about it, and she thanked me for the communication, and we were fine. And then 4 months later, of course, her publisher writes to me, would I like to, supply a blurb for her book.
Did you turn it?
I didn't reply. I just thought, I don't know. Maybe
it wasn't like
their
a
limits.
fucking certain poets.
There are all kinds of conversations I'd like to have with her, and I'd be willing to have with her in public. But I felt like that was a kind of instrumentalization of the name again. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I thought we were trying to move to the side of the name. Yeah. We were trying to, but she likes names. Okay, anyway. Okay.
Using your own name for name calling.
Maybe. Anyway, maybe I didn't do the right thing, but I let it go. Let's see. Okay, so, sure, okay.
Judith, can I tell you something real quickly?
Yes.
The class too. I was at a transgender event about 2 weeks ago in New York, and they also hoped your name.
In that way?
But it was thank you, Judith Butler.
Oh, well, that's because you were probably at the Kate Bornstein event. And, Kate Bornstein, she actually bases her understanding of transsexuality on the idea of perpetual becoming. She's almost a kind of closet Deleuzian, and I think, for her, the point is not to start in one place and then transition to another place and then be in that second place forever. It's transitioning as something that is always happening, that's reiterating. So it's a little closer to my position. And I think that's, those positions, that's where queer trans stuff can actually, it's one place where I think it can be quite important. But okay, so let me just say this. I would like to try to think a little bit about what it is to be called by a name and why it's important. When we talk about cross-gendered identification, I think we can talk about identification here. I think people invariably get caught up in the vacillation between sociological and psychological discourses. So even when I just described the situation, and you can see how awkward I was trying to use language, we speak about a girl who finds that she identifies as a boy, and then we posit a kind of sociological girl as a kind of given who finds herself engaged by toys, desires, venues that are understood as masculine. It's hard. Is she really a sociological girl to begin with? What does it mean that we start that way? Do we already stabilize her before we actually even describe, what's going on? And I wonder if our grammar, our everyday grammar, holds to the idea of a sociological girl who is separate from a particular psychic identification that she might have. At a certain point, does a certain kind of cross-gendered identification compel us to rethink the sociological categories? Is this still a girl? Or a boy who cross-identifies? Do we want to say it's a boy who cross-identifies? At what point do we decide that the cross-identification is serious enough and worthy enough of a certain kind of recognition that that sociological boy is actually no longer exactly a boy but something else? We have to leave the sociological category.